This is Tech Tales 14. It's Friday afternoon, May 17th, 4:54 p.m. I'm trying out this edition of Tech Tales on a YouTube live stream to see how that works because I have some plans and intentions for YouTube live streaming down the road. So this will be a normal Tech Tales edition. Tell about my day today. Okay, so it started with a meeting with Michael at the local bank. I mentioned to you before about a client of mine I'm referring to as CC that's contemplating changing to this bank for the management that they do of finances for people who, for whatever reason, don't manage their own finances. And it involves being able to take a PDF file that comes from the bank that has a listing of all of the deposits that have been received by the bank on behalf of, and I suppose in trust for, these individuals. And I've set up a system for them that takes this PDF file and extracts the information that's needed from it and puts it into an Excel spreadsheet in raw form, and then another spreadsheet that manipulates that information into the method or organization that is needed by QuickBooks. And then we export that information from Excel into what's called a QuickBooks IIF file, I think interchange information format, something to that effect. So that QuickBooks can then import that information and present it in the appropriate accounts in QuickBooks so that it can be managed. So my meeting this morning was to take a laptop out to Michael and show him how this process is done, so that they can determine how they can best fit into this. And the conclusion was that their bank would provide the PDF, probably provide the PDF file in a similar format. And I would just need to make some adjustments probably to the systems that pull that information from the PDF file in order to accommodate the format that this bank would be providing, which would be similar enough that it should just be adjustments to be made. So then the next thing worth mentioning, I had a call from a client that I will refer to as, how would I call them? It's MT, but it's a different MT than I've talked to you before. Let's call it MID. Just call it MID, M-I-D. And what they do is they supply terminals, electrical components, the ends that might be on wires to plug in, or the sockets they plug into. Could be for automotive, could be for household, could be for industrial, lots of different purposes. This is not a manufacturer, but I suppose I've heard the term jobber before, where likely they get these components from manufacturers and then provide them out to perhaps retailers or industrial users that probably ordering large quantities, but they're open to the public. I've seen people come in and just buy onesies and twosies of different types of component connectors that they need. And I suppose, I'm not sure if they sell wire or not, but anyway, they have a point of sale software that they use from Windows-based computers. They've got one at the counter and they've got a couple more in the back offices. Well, one of the back office computers was unable today to launch the program. And the reason is the icon that was on the desktop was missing. He reported that he was in the program working with it, and then he got an error message. So essentially the program crashed. When he got back to his desktop, there was no icon for launching the program. And we'd had a problem with this software a couple years ago, and I worked with it and worked with the software manufacturer and spent quite a significant amount of time trying to come up with a solution. And I wound up discovering a workaround for it that was intended to just be short term. And the icon on the two back office computers was labeled with the word testing. This method of launching the program was intended to just be testing. And then at that time, we decided to just see how that goes after a few days. And it worked for them. And that wound up just being the permanent long-term solution with this essentially a workaround patch that I had worked out for them. So I connected remotely to his computer and essentially recreated that shortcut on his desktop, utilizing the notes that I had and also utilizing a cell phone picture that I had him take of the other back office computer. Because as I went and looked through my lengthy notes about the troubleshooting work that I had done on it, I didn't actually have specific notes of that testing icon that I had created because it was just thought to be temporary. And it never occurred to me at the time that we decided to just try it for a few days, that it didn't occur to me that that would be the long-term solution. So it never got actually into my notes. But we got it handled and all is good. So then the next thing worth reporting is I had a client who sent me an email very early this morning. I've talked about him before, Don at the construction company. Well, this was a different issue than what I've talked to you about before. He sent me an email saying that he had gotten an email that he was worried about. It was a message that was claiming that his email account had been hacked and that this message was coming from the hacker and demanding a payment, a Bitcoin payment. Otherwise, this hacker was going to publish or send out what they claimed to be incriminating information about Don to all of Don's contacts. Well, I've seen this type of thing many times before, and Don has seen it too, and it's always been a hoax, and I'm sure this time it's a hoax also. But there was one little twist here that kind of gave me a little extra concern. So we did an extra level of due diligence and changed the passwords for this particular email account. Now, what I did is I went to the web account for this email address and found that the account looked a little suspicious, because when I went into the account properties, there was a place where it has first name and last name for the individual who holds this particular email address. And I found a first and last name that did not make sense. And I called Don and said, "Do you know this name?" And I told him the first and last name that was in there. He said, no, he didn't. So that gave me a little extra level of concern. So I changed that name that was in the account, changed the password for that email account, and updated the password on 5 of his computers that are all configured to receive email for this particular email account. It was an account that was general for all of the office staff to receive. It actually wasn't destined for one individual. Now, this email message that was claiming to be from the hacker and demanding the ransom payment showed an address in the from line as that email address, meaning it was coming from that address to that address. And typically I can find an indication that it was actually coming from some other address. And the only indication that I found of that at this point is that the sent items folder did not contain that email. Now, if somebody had hacked the account and used the webmail interface to send the email, it should be in the sent items folder on that webmail web page, and it wasn't. The other thing that was strange about this is the body of the email that had this long message with a bunch of grammatical errors and a bunch of spelling errors, which is pretty much always consistent with these hoaxes. It wasn't actual text, it was an image. I click anywhere in that text area and I'd get the four corners, the border around it and four corners where it could be stretched, expanded, or shrunken up. So it was actually a image of this text. It wasn't actual text. And I suspect that that's a way to get around spam filters or hoax filters that some email providers have built into their systems. Now, one of the things about this instance, this situation, and the construction company is their email hosting company is a company that I had never heard of and still have never heard of outside of this office. I'm guessing it's a small email provider by comparison to the major email providers such as Gmail and Microsoft.com, Outlook.com. And they probably don't have as good of filtering to block these types of bad actors on the internet. Also, there's a history with Don's office that we've had a number of infections and what could be called hackers in the past. And part of that reason is when I got involved with Don's office, somewhere back in history, his computer had gotten configured for remote desktop, Microsoft Remote Desktop, and Don was actually using that to connect to his office computer remotely from other locations. Well, because of the things that had happened with his computer, I came to the conclusion that this was a source of vulnerability to have a computer with remote access through Microsoft Windows turned on. It's not anywhere near as secure as using a third-party remote access software such as LogMeIn. And so we did move him over to LogMeIn and we turned off the remote access capability through Microsoft Remote Desktop, so that we're not using that anymore, and that functionality is completely disabled. So because of that background in his office of having hacker instances, we take an extra level of security. Now, something that I did to increase the level of security, we were already using complex passwords on all of their accounts and using different passwords on their different accounts. The password on this particular account that may or may not have been compromised was 8 characters long, 8 or 9 characters long. It had a mix of uppercase and lowercase letters, and it had a mix of alphabetic letters and numbers and symbols. So it's a complex password. This time I put in a significantly longer password, also with the same mix of characters of different elements. So that is the things worth mentioning from today's activity, and I'll catch you next time. Have a good day. Bye.